What if your favorite perfume could do more than just make you smell nice? What if it could connect you, across thousands of years, to the very essence of how an ancient civilization understood power, divinity, and the afterlife? Picture a modern glass bottle, but let its smooth lines melt away, transforming into the cool, milky surface of an alabaster vessel carved with hieroglyphs and sealed with resin. This is where our journey begins, not with a simple fragrance, but with a key to unlocking one of history's most enigmatic and aromatic cultures. For the ancient Egyptians, scented oils were never just about personal adornment. They were the breath of the gods, a currency for the soul's journey, and a fundamental thread in the fabric of life and death itself. We are about to embark on an extraordinary attempt to bridge the millennium, to reach across time and recreate the very scents that filled the temples of Karnak, the palaces of Thebes, and the tombs in the Valley of the Kings. This is not merely a historical exercise, it is a sensory expedition. We are going to follow the faint, tantalizing clues left behind in temple reliefs, on papyrus scrolls, and within the sacred texts. We will decipher the recipes that called for ingredients like frankincense, myrrh, and the elusive lily, and we will partner with the precise tools of modern chemistry to understand what these ancient perfumers, these priestly chemists, actually accomplished. The goal is profound: to mix these ingredients once more, not as a rough approximation, but as a true revival, to experience a fragrance that hasn't been truly smelled in over 2,000 years. Imagine catching the scent that Cleopatra might have worn to meet Mark Antony, or the sacred oil used to anoint a pharaoh for his coronation. This is the power we are tapping into, the ability to smell time itself. So prepare for a voyage that is as much about science as it is about soul. We will explore why these oils were considered more valuable than gold, how they were believed to please the deities and protect the dead, and what their complex creation tells us about a society that saw the world in both practical and profoundly spiritual terms. This is an invitation to step beyond the pages of history books and into a world you can actually breathe in. You are not just watching a video, you are joining a quest to recover a lost piece of human sensation, to understand an ancient people through one of our most powerful and evocative senses, the sense of smell. Let's open this ancient vessel together and discover what secrets it has held for so long. To truly grasp their significance, we must first set aside our modern understanding of perfume as a simple accessory. In ancient Egypt, scented oils were, in a very real sense, considered the sweat of the gods. The air itself was believed to be the breath of the deity Shu, and so any pleasing aroma that filled it was a direct connection to the divine. This is why the most important use of these precious concoctions was within the temple walls. Every single day, in a ritual known as the Awakening of the God, priests would enter the sanctuary housing the statue of a deity like Amun-Ra or Hathor. The ritual involved cleansing, clothing, and anointing the statue with the finest oils and unguents. This was not just a cleaning, it was a way of revitalizing the god's spiritual presence, of making the deity feel welcome and honored in its own home. The thick, aromatic smoke from burning kai-fi, a complex incense, and the rich scents of anointing oils were like a divine meal, a sustenance that pleased the gods and encouraged them to maintain the cosmic order, or Ma'at, upon which all of Egyptian society depended. A displeased god might withdraw their favor, leading to chaos, so these scented offerings were a matter of national security. Beyond the sacred temples, these oils were deeply woven into the fabric of daily life, serving purposes that were at once practical, medicinal, and social. In the intense heat of the Egyptian climate, applying oils was a fundamental part of hygiene. They moisturized the skin, protected it from the harsh sun and dry winds, and, thanks to their aromatic properties, helped mask body odor. But they were also the ancient world's equivalent of a pharmacy. Recipes found in medical papyri show that oils were infused with specific plants and resins to treat a wide range of ailments. An oil infused with juniper might be used to soothe sore muscles, while one with frankincense could be applied to a wound for its perceived antiseptic qualities. The line between perfume, cosmetic, and medicine was beautifully blurred. For the elite, the choice of fragrance was a powerful social signal. The type of oil you wore announced your status, wealth, and even your profession. A vizier at the pharaoh's court would be expected to smell of rare, imported myrrh, while a common laborer might use simpler, locally produced castor oil. In this way, scent was a silent language, speaking volumes about a person's place in the world before they even uttered a word. Perhaps the most profound demonstration of their importance, however, was in the journey to the afterlife. The Egyptians were realists. They understood that the process of mummification, while necessary for preservation, produced powerful and unpleasant odors. The use of vast quantities of natron salt and the evisceration of the body created a practical need to mask the smell, not just for the living handlers, but as a sign of respect for the deceased. More crucially, they believed the soul needed a recognizable and intact body to return to. By anointing the body with the same sacred oils used in temple rituals, oils of cedar, myrrh, and cinnamon, they were performing a final transformative act. They were not merely preserving a corpse, they were ritually preparing the deceased, making them fragrant and pure, worthy of standing before Osiris, the god of the dead. Canopic jars, which held the internal organs, were also filled with scented oils, ensuring every part of the individual was sanctified. The tomb itself would be stocked with jars of oils for the soul's use in the afterlife, a luxury item as essential as food and water. This multifaceted value, divine, practical, medicinal, and funerary, naturally elevated scented oils to the highest echelons of the economy. They became a form of currency and a symbol of immense wealth. Tomb paintings often depict scenes of vast quantities of oil being presented as tribute to the pharaoh or as trade goods from foreign lands. In the tomb of the official Rekhmire, we see envoys from Punt offering great pots of myrrh, a testament to its worth. Because many of the key ingredients, like frankincense and myrrh, had to be imported from great distances through treacherous trade routes, their cost was astronomical. A small vial of the finest oil could be worth more than a farmer's yearly harvest. They were given as royal gifts, used to pay skilled laborers who built the pyramids, and included in the dowries of noblewomen. To possess these oils was to possess a piece of the divine, a tool for health, a passport to eternity, and a tangible measure of worldly power, all in one. They were not a peripheral luxury, but a cornerstone of civilization, as vital to the Egyptian worldview as the Nile that sustained them. So, how do we even begin to reconstruct scents that vanished millennia ago? The evidence is surprisingly abundant, scattered across temple walls, buried in tombs, and preserved on fragile papyrus. It's a detective story where every clue, from a carved image to a chemical stain, brings us one step closer to the ancient perfumer's workshop. One of our most vivid windows into this world comes from the elaborate reliefs that adorn places like the Temple of Edfu. Here, we don't just read about the process, we can see it unfold in intricate detail. These carvings show us the entire chain of production, from the harvesting of lotus flowers and the tapping of frankincense trees to the meticulous stirring of oils in large vats. We see the tools they use: the mortars and pestles for grinding resins, the cloths for straining mixtures, and the distinctive, elegant jars used for storage. These images are more than simple artwork, they are instructional manuals carved in stone, providing a step-by-step guide to a sacred craft. They tell us that perfumery was not a hidden art, but a celebrated, organized industry, often taking place within the temple precincts themselves under the watchful eyes of the priests. But a picture can only tell us so much. To get to the heart of the matter, we need physical evidence, and nothing provides that more powerfully than the actual containers these oils were stored in. The tomb of Tutankhamun yielded a spectacular array of alabaster jars, many still containing the dried, hardened residues of their original contents. While the volatile aromatic compounds have long since evaporated, modern science can work wonders with what remains. Through a technique called gas chromatography mass spectrometry, chemists can analyze these ancient residues and identify the unique molecular fingerprints of the plants and resins used. It's like finding a faded recipe where the ingredients are listed in a language of atoms and molecules. In Tutankhamun's tomb, these analyses have confirmed the presence of frankincense and a type of pistachio resin, offering tangible, chemical proof of the specific materials the Egyptians valued most highly for their king's journey to the afterlife. This residue analysis transforms an empty jar from a mere artifact into a silent witness, its very walls imbued with the ghost of a fragrance. Beyond the visual and the chemical, we have the written word. Papyrus scrolls serve as our direct line of communication with ancient Egyptian thinkers, particularly their physicians and priests. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest and most important medical texts, is a treasure trove of information. While it is primarily a medical document, it reveals the profound overlap between medicine, magic, and perfumery. It lists numerous aromatic plants like juniper, myrrh, and cinnamon, and provides detailed recipes for their use. A recipe might call for an oil to be infused with a specific plant to treat a headache or a skin condition. These texts give us the names, the quantities, and the intended effects. They show us that the choice of ingredients was not arbitrary. Each plant was selected for its perceived spiritual and physiological properties. A recipe for a sacred oil was, in many ways, also a prescription for spiritual and physical well-being. Piecing together these fragments, the carvings on the walls, the residues in the jars, the words on the papyrus, is like assembling a complex puzzle where many of the pieces are forever lost. We might have a recipe from a papyrus, but not know the exact grinding technique shown in a temple relief. We might identify a residue in a jar, but lack the written name the Egyptians gave to that particular blend. The challenge lies in correlating these disparate sources, in matching the chemical evidence with the textual names and the artistic depictions. It requires the collaboration of Egyptologists, chemists, and botanists, all working together to cross-reference the clues. This interdisciplinary effort is what allows us to move from a list of ingredients to a believable reconstruction of the experience, to understand not just what was in the bottle, but what it meant to the people who created it and relied upon its power every day. With this understanding of their profound cultural role, we can now turn our attention to the very substances that gave these oils their power, the sacred ingredients themselves. Ancient Egypt's perfumer's palette was a rich tapestry woven from local botanicals and exotic imports, each plant and resin chosen as much for its spiritual resonance as for its aromatic profile. At the very heart of this botanical bounty was the iconic blue lotus, or Nymphea caerulea. This was not merely a beautiful flower, it was a plant deeply entwined with creation myths and spiritual awakening. The lotus, which closes at night and re-emerges with the rising sun, was a powerful symbol of rebirth and the sun god Ra, but its use went beyond symbolism. Historical evidence suggests the blue lotus possessed mild psychoactive properties. It was commonly steeped in wine, a practice depicted in banquet scenes where the flower's essence would be released, creating a fragrant, subtly mood-altering beverage. This ritual was believed to induce a state of calm euphoria, opening a doorway to the divine and enhancing spiritual experiences. In perfumery, Capturing its sweet, floral, and slightly green scent was paramount, making it a cornerstone of both sacred ceremonies and personal luxury. No discussion of Egyptian aromatics would be complete without the legendary duo of frankincense and myrrh. These were the superstar imports, the priceless resins that traveled thousands of miles along treacherous trade routes from the distant lands of Punt and Arabia. Frankincense, the dried sap of the boswellia tree, was prized for its bright, clean, lemony pine scent when burned. Its smoke was considered the purest offering to the gods, a vehicle for prayers to ascend to the heavens. Myrrh from the commiphora tree offered a deeper, richer, more balsamic and slightly medicinal aroma. It was associated with mourning, purification, and preservation, making it essential in the mummification process. The immense effort required to procure these resins, organizing royal expeditions, navigating foreign territories, and transporting the precious cargo back to Egypt cemented their status as commodities more valuable than gold. Their use was a clear statement of power, piety, and connection to a world far beyond the Nile Valley, yet the Egyptian aromatic world was not solely dependent on foreign treasures. The Nile Valley itself provided an abundance of fragrant native plants. Mayweed, a flower resembling chamomile, was widely used for its soothing, apple-like scent and its perceived medicinal benefits for the skin. Then there was the balanos plant, whose nuts yielded a prized oil that was a staple in many cosmetic and perfumery recipes. Balanos oil had a unique, sharp, and somewhat spicy character, often compared to a rustic, green olive oil with a peppery kick. It served as a versatile base, carrying the scents of other infused botanicals. The Egyptians also cultivated and traded for a variety of other aromatic materials. Cinnamon, with its warm, sweet, and woody fragrance, was a highly coveted spice that had to be imported from Southeast Asia through a long chain of middlemen, making it incredibly rare and expensive. Similarly, the wood and berries of the cypress tree, valued for their clean, woody, and slightly smoky aroma, were imported and used for both their scent and their symbolic association with eternity and the afterlife. This combination of homegrown wonders and hard-won exotics created a sophisticated and layered olfactory landscape, a testament to the Egyptians' deep knowledge of their environment and their far-reaching influence. The challenge, then, is to take these scattered clues, the temple carvings, the papyrus recipes, the chemical traces, and weave them back into a living, breathing fragrance. This is where history meets high technology in a form of modern alchemy. The most powerful tool in this endeavor is a technique known as gas chromatography mass spectrometry, or GCMS. Think of it as a molecular time machine. Scientists begin with those ancient residues found in tombs like Tutankhamun's, a tiny scraping of the dark, hardened substance clinging to the inside of an alabaster jar. This sample is vaporized, turning it into a gas. This gas is then sent through a long, coiled column. As the molecules travel through this column, they separate based on their size and weight, much like runners in a race spreading out along a track. Each component exits the column at a different, predictable time. This is where the magic happens. As each separated molecule exits, it is blasted with electrons, causing it to break apart in a unique, signature pattern. The mass spectrometer acts as a scale, weighing these fragments. The result is a complex graph, a molecular fingerprint that is entirely unique to each specific substance. It's the chemical equivalent of finding an ancient signature. By comparing these ancient graphs to the known fingerprints of modern resins, oils, and plants, scientists can say with remarkable certainty, this residue in this 3,000-year-old jar contained frankincense, and not just any frankincense, but a specific type sourced from a particular region. This technique moves us beyond guesswork, providing a definitive chemical inventory of what the Egyptians actually used, but identifying the ingredients is only half the battle. The next step is perhaps even more complex, understanding the proportions and the processing methods. A papyrus might list frankincense, myrrh, and cinnamon, but it rarely gives precise measurements like we would expect in a modern recipe. This is where the other forms of evidence become critical. Historians and chemists work together to cross-reference the GCMS data with the quantities of ingredients mentioned in texts and the depictions of production in temple reliefs. These carvings might show the number of pots of one resin compared to another, giving a visual clue to the ratios. They also illustrate the techniques where the resins ground into a fine powder first, where they heated gently to release their oils, or steeped in a base oil for weeks under the sun. Recreating the scent isn't just about mixing the right chemicals, it's about replicating the ancient artisan's entire process. This leads to a fascinating collaboration with botanists and horticulturalists. The frankincense tree that grows today may be genetically similar to the one harvested in ancient times, but soil composition, climate, and other environmental factors can subtly alter the chemical profile of its resin. The quest for authenticity often involves sourcing materials from the same regions the Egyptians would have traded with, such as the Dhofar region of Oman, for frankincense. For other plants, like the legendary lily or certain native herbs that may be extinct or extremely rare, botanists work to identify the closest living relative, using historical descriptions and genetic analysis to find a modern stand-in that would produce a nearly identical scent profile. This painstaking effort ensures that the final recreation is not just a theoretical approximation, but an olfactory experience as close as possible to what an ancient Egyptian priest or queen would have recognized. It's a symphony of disciplines, with each scientist and historian contributing an essential note to reconstruct a silent melody of scent that has been lost for millennia. Of all the ancient Egyptian aromatic creations, perhaps none is more legendary or shrouded in mystery than Kai-Fi. While we often think of it as an incense burned to create fragrant smoke, its story is deeply intertwined with that of sacred oils. Kai-Fi was a masterful blend, a symphony of scents so potent and spiritually charged that its recipe was considered a sacred text in itself. The most complete instructions we have come from the walls of the Temple of Edfu, a massive stone recipe book that has preserved the formula for over 2,000 years. It reads like a culinary and alchemical marvel, calling for a surprising combination of raisins and wine for a sweet, fermented base, honey for its thick, preserving quality, and then a cascade of resins and botanicals, myrrh and frankincense, of course, but also cinnamon, aromatic woods, and plants whose names are now obscure, like aspalathus. This was not a simple mixture, it was a layered, complex potion that required knowledge passed down through generations of priests. The creation of Kai-Fi was a ritual in its own right, an act of devotion that could span several days. It was far more than a mechanical process. The priests who prepared it did so following strict religious protocols, often chanting hymns or reciting spells as they worked. The ingredients weren't just combined, they were processed with intention. Resins were ground at specific times of day, perhaps to align with the movement of the sun or stars. The raisins would be macerated in the wine, the honey would be gently warmed, and each component was added in a precise sequence. The entire mixture would then be left to mature, to allow the individual scents to marry and transform into something entirely new. This lengthy, ceremonial preparation elevated Kai-Fi from a mere substance to a living entity, a physical manifestation of prayer meant to please the gods with its unparalleled aroma. It was believed that the scent of Kai-Fi could soothe the gods, encourage dreams, and even heal the sick, making its creation one of the most important duties within the temple complex. Attempting to recreate Cleopatra today presents a fascinating set of puzzles for historians and perfumers. The first major hurdle is interpreting the ancient measurements. The Edfu inscriptions might call for a certain number of hecats or rho of an ingredient, but translating these volumetric units into modern weight or volume is not an exact science. The consistency of the raisins, the sweetness of the wine, the viscosity of the honey, all these variables mean that two teams following the same ancient recipe could end up with noticeably different results. But the greater challenge lies in the ingredients themselves. Some, like juniper, are still widely available, though finding berries that match the specific profile of those used in ancient Egypt requires careful sourcing. Others, like aspalathus, are a true mystery. Scholars debate whether this term referred to a type of broom plant, a rose, or something else entirely that may have since gone extinct or been renamed. Sourcing a convincing substitute involves deep botanical detective work, comparing ancient descriptions with known plants from the Mediterranean and North Africa. Despite these obstacles, modern recreations have given us a glimpse into this ancient olfactory wonder. The resulting fragrance is unlike anything in our modern perfume lexicon. It is not a single sharp note, but a deep, resonant, and evolving aroma. Upon first smell, you might detect the warm, fruity sweetness from the raisins and wine, a comforting, almost bready quality. Then the sharper, pine-like brightness of the frankincense emerges, followed by the deep, smoky bitterness of the myrrh. The cinnamon and other spices add a warm, woody backbone, creating a scent that is simultaneously earthy and celestial. It's a fragrance that feels vast and complex, a scent that seems to fill a room with presence rather than just a perfume. To experience a well-researched recreation of Cleopatra is to understand why the Egyptians believed it was a direct line to the divine. It's a fragrance that doesn't just please the nose, but seems to speak to something much deeper, a timeless echo of ritual and belief captured in a single, profound aroma. Moving from the sacred smoke of temple rituals to the very skin of a ruler, we enter the realm of the pharaoh's personal fragrance. This was far more than a pleasant aroma, it was an olfactory crown, a deliberate and potent statement of power, divinity, and political acumen. If we were to attempt to recreate the scent of a pharaoh, we would be blending not just resins and flowers, but the very essence of kingship itself. Based on the treasures found in royal tombs and the accounts of court life, we can speculate that a royal scent would have been a rich, symphonic blend, deliberately composed to overwhelm the senses and command respect. It would almost certainly have been built upon a foundation of the most expensive and politically significant imports: frankincense, myrrh, and cedarwood. Frankincense, with its bright, solar connection to the god Ra, would have been essential for a ruler who was considered the son of Ra, a living god on earth. Its clean, lemony resinous scent was the smell of divinity itself. Myrrh, with its deeper, more somber and medicinal qualities, spoke to permanence, preservation, and the pharaoh's role as the guarantor of Ma'at, the eternal order of the universe. Then there is cedarwood, an import from Lebanon that was prized not only for its magnificent timber used in palaces and ships, but also for its essential oil. The scent of cedarwood is dry, woody, and incredibly tenacious. It acts as a powerful fixative, making other fragrances last longer. On a practical level, it would have helped the royal aroma linger in throne rooms and during processions. Symbolically, it represented Egypt's far-reaching power and its ability to command resources from distant lands. A pharaoh smelling of cedar wood was a pharaoh whose influence stretched to the very edges of the known world. But could a pharaoh have had a signature scent, a personal brand as recognizable as their cartouche? The evidence strongly suggests yes. Consider the case of Hatshepsut, the female pharaoh who ruled as a king. Her famous expedition to the land of Punt was monumental. a state-sponsored venture primarily aimed at securing living frankincense and myrrh trees to be transplanted in Egypt. This wasn't just a shopping trip, it was an act of economic and religious policy designed to bring the source of divine fragrance directly under her control. The murals in her mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri vividly depict the returning ships laden with these precious trees, along with heaps of raw incense and fragrant woods. It is incredibly plausible that Hatshepsut, to solidify her unique and somewhat controversial position as a female king, would have commissioned a specific, unforgettable fragrance. A scent that was uniquely hers, a complex blend featuring the very frankincense and myrrh she had successfully procured, would have been a constant, aromatic reminder of her power, her divine mandate, and her successful reign. Every time a courtier caught that distinctive scent, they would be reminded of her achievements. For a pharaoh like Ramses II, a scent would have been a crucial tool of statecraft. Known for his massive building projects, military campaigns, and prolific family, Ramses was a master of propaganda. His image is carved on monuments across Egypt. It is easy to imagine that his personal fragrance was another layer of this projection of power. In the heat of diplomatic meetings or public appearances, his aroma would have preceded him and lingered after he left. A blend featuring strong, assertive notes like labdanum, a resin with a leathery, animalic quality, combined with the authority of cedarwood and the sanctity of frankincense, would have created an aura of unshakable strength and ancient legitimacy. This wasn't mere vanity, it was psychological warfare and political theater delivered through the sense of smell. In a world without mass media, the pharaoh's scent was a powerful, intimate broadcast of their identity, assuring allies and intimidating rivals simply through their presence. Ultimately, recreating a pharaoh's fragrance is an attempt to understand the most personal aspect of their divine kingship. It is one thing to see their golden mask or read their inscriptions, but to smell what they smelled, to experience the aromatic shield they placed between themselves and the world, is to connect with them on a profoundly human level. That scent was their armor, their crown, and their voice, a silent but overwhelming proclamation that the living God was present. While the pharaoh's scent was a declaration of power, another fragrance captured the very soul of the Nile itself, the legendary blue lotus. Recreating its aroma is a pursuit that bridges profound symbolism with a uniquely challenging botanical reality. The flower's scent profile is a delicate paradox. It's primarily sweet and floral, reminiscent of a soft honeyed rose, but it carries a mysterious, slightly spicy, and almost peppery green undertone. There's a subtle aquatic quality to it, a fresh, watery note that evokes the marshes where it bloomed, making it a truly unique and elusive fragrance that modern perfumers are determined to capture. The ancient Egyptians had a beautifully simple, yet time-consuming, method for capturing this essence: infusion. They would harvest the delicate blossoms and steep them for weeks or even months in a neutral base oil, often something like balanos or moringa oil. Placed in the hot Egyptian sun, the oil would slowly absorb the volatile aromatic compounds from the petals. This was a gentle process, but it had its limitations. The resulting infusion carried the soul of the lotus, but it was a subtle scent, and it required vast quantities of flowers to create even a small amount of fragrant oil. It was a method of patience, mirroring the flower's own slow, daily rebirth from the water. Modern techniques, by contrast, are acts of precision and power designed to wrest every last aromatic molecule from the blossom. One of the most effective methods is solvent extraction. In this process, fresh lotus flowers are washed repeatedly with a solvent like hexane, which dissolves the fragrant compounds, including those that are too fragile or insoluble for other methods. The solvent is then carefully evaporated away, leaving behind a waxy substance known as a concrete. This concrete can be further processed with alcohol to separate the pure aromatic absolute from the wax. The result is an incredibly potent, deep, and true-to-life essence of the blue lotus, a concentrate that is far more intense than any ancient infusion could ever achieve. It's a technological marvel, but one that separates us from the slow, solar alchemy of the ancient method. The significance of this flower, however, goes far beyond its technical extraction. To understand why its recreation is so meaningful, we must appreciate the immense cultural weight it carried. The blue lotus was not just a pretty flower, it was a fundamental symbol of creation and rebirth. Its daily cycle, sinking beneath the water at night and rising triumphantly with the dawn to open its petals to the sun, made it a living representation of the sun god Ra himself, emerging from the primordial waters of Nun to bring light to the world. To smell the lotus was to inhale the essence of cosmic renewal. This connection to the divine was deeply personal. The lotus was also intimately associated with sensual pleasure and altered states of consciousness. Banquet scenes depict wealthy Egyptians adorning themselves with lotus blossoms, often leaning over to inhale their fragrance deeply. It is believed that the flower possesses mild psychoactive properties. When steeped in wine, as was common, it could induce a state of calm euphoria and heightened awareness. Therefore, the scent of lotus was the aroma of celebration, of intimacy, and of a spiritual doorway opening. To wear a recreation of this scent is not merely to apply a perfume, it is to anoint oneself with the ancient concepts of rebirth, divine connection, and the joyous celebration of life. Capturing its elusive aroma is an attempt to bottle a piece of the Egyptian world view itself. This meticulous preparation for eternity brings us to one of the most specific and solemn applications of scent, the sacred oils used to transform the deceased for their journey through the underworld. Funerary texts painted on tomb walls and written on papyri provide us with a detailed roadmap for this final voyage, and central to this process were the legendary 7 sacred oils. These were not a random assortment but a carefully curated collection, each oil possessing its own unique name, purpose, and connection to a specific deity. Their application was a ritual of profound importance, a sequence of anointings that fortified the soul for the challenges ahead. For instance, one oil, known as Hekenu, was associated with the god Horus and was used to anoint the face, perhaps to restore the senses for the afterlife. Another, Sephet, was linked to the serpent goddess Wadjet and might have been applied to the torso for protection. Each anointing was a prayer in action, a physical plea to a different divine power for their specific blessing and intervention. Beyond their spiritual symbolism, these oils served remarkably practical functions that modern science has only recently begun to fully appreciate. Take cedar oil, a key component in many embalming rituals. When chemists analyzed residues from mummification workshops, they confirmed the presence of compounds found in cedar. This oil, with its sharp, clean, woody aroma, was likely valued not just for its symbolic connection to eternity, but for its potent antiseptic and insect-repelling qualities. It would have helped purify the body, slowing decomposition and warding off pests during the lengthy 70-day mummification process. Similarly, pistachier resin, another substance frequently identified in archaeological remains, was prized for its excellent preserving properties. This resin, which has a fresh, green, and slightly pine-like scent, contains natural antioxidants and antimicrobial agents. The ancient embalmers, through centuries of observation and practice, intuitively understood which substances best served their dual goal of physical preservation and spiritual transformation. The actual ceremony of anointment was a deeply solemn and theatrical event, likely conducted by priests wearing the masks of Anubis, the jackal-headed god of embalming. Imagine the scene within the dim, incense-filled pure place, the embalmer's workshop. The mummified body, now wrapped in pristine linen, lay on a ceremonial slab. The priests would approach with their alabaster jars, each containing one of the sacred oils. With deliberate, ritualized movements, they would anoint different parts of the body: the head, the arms, the torso, the legs. This was not a simple rub down, it was a final act of consecration. The goal was to make the deceased effective or true of voice, a term meaning they would be empowered and articulate when standing before the tribunal of gods in the Hall of Mad. The rich, aromatic scents of cedar, myrrh, and cinnamon that filled the air were believed to comfort the soul of the deceased, reassuring them as they began their perilous journey. These fragrances served as a familiar, protective shield in the strange and terrifying landscape of the underworld. Ultimately, the use of these oils reveals the Egyptians' profound and beautiful pragmatism about death. They recognized the unpleasant realities of bodily decay and addressed them with the most effective tools at their disposal, but they never lost sight of the spiritual dimension. By anointing the body with the same precious substances used to honor the gods in life, they were performing a final alchemical act. They were transfiguring a mortal corpse into a sacred, eternal vessel, a fragrant, perfected being worthy of standing before Osiris. The scent that clung to the mummy was the last impression left with the living and the first greeting for the gods of the dead, a final, aromatic passport to immortality. Frankincense and myrrh were the twin pillars of the ancient Egyptian aromatic world. Far more than simple ingredients, they were the lifeblood of ritual and a testament to Egypt's global reach. To truly understand their power, we must trace their journey back to the source, to the harsh, sun-baked landscapes where they began. Frankincense comes from trees of the Boswellia genus, which thrive in the dry, rocky soils of Oman, Yemen, and Somalia. Myrrh is the resin of the Commiphora tree, found in similar regions across the Horn of Africa and the Arabian Peninsula. Harvesting these resins was and still is a patient, skilled art. Incision makers would make precise cuts into the tree's bark, allowing the milky, aromatic sap to weep out. This sap would then harden on the bark into tear-shaped droplets, which were carefully scraped off after weeks of exposure to the air. The first harvest yields a lower quality resin. The most precious, fragrant tears come from subsequent harvests, making the process a long-term commitment between the harvester and the tree. This intimate, labor-intensive beginning is what made every ounce of these resins so inherently valuable even before they began their long voyage. That voyage was an epic in itself, a sprawling network of trade routes that formed the ancient world's equivalent of the spice road. Caravans of donkeys and camels, sometimes thousands of animals strong, would carry these precious loads northward. They would travel from the southern coasts of Arabia, skirting the vast, empty quarter of the desert, moving up the western coast of the peninsula to reach the trading hubs of the Levant. From there, the resins would be shipped across the Mediterranean or carried overland to the Nile Delta. This journey was perilous, taking months and subject to bandits, extreme weather, and the politics of the many territories it crossed. The cost of this logistical feat was immense, and it was reflected in the final price. By the time a jar of frankincense or myrrh reached a priest in Thebes, it had accumulated the value of every mile traveled and every risk taken. This immense effort cemented their status. To possess them was to possess a piece of the wider world, a symbol of a kingdom's wealth and influence. But what did these legendary substances actually smell like? Modern recreations allow us to experience their profiles with a clarity the ancients might have envied. High-quality frankincense, when the resin is warmed or burned, releases a scent that is clean, bright, and complex. It has a citrus-like, almost lemony sharpness at the top, backed by a warm, piney, and slightly peppery woodiness. It's an uplifting and purifying aroma, one that seems to clear the air and the mind. Myrrh, by contrast, offers a deeper, more somber character. Its scent is rich, resinous, and balsamic, with a distinctive, slightly bitter, medicinal edge. There's a warmth to it that is earthy and intimate, less about filling a space with light and more about creating a sense of grounded solemnity. When recreated as essential oils through modern steam distillation, these scents are captured in their pure, potent form. To smell them side by side is to understand why they were so often paired. Frankincense reaches for the heavens, while myrrh connects us to the earth, creating a complete spiritual circuit. This duality of purpose is exactly why they were considered the king of resins. Their value was a powerful combination of the practical and the profoundly symbolic. On a practical level, when burned as incense, their smoke acted as a natural disinfectant and insect repellent in crowded temples and during the mummification process. But their primary worth was spiritual. Frankincense, with its bright, ascending smoke, was seen as the perfect offering to the solar deities like Ra. Its scent was the very breath of the sun, a vehicle for prayers to rise and be heard. Myrrh, with its deep, preserving qualities and its use in anointing the dead, was intrinsically linked to Osiris and the afterlife. It represented the necessary decay and transformation required for rebirth, the bittersweet price of eternity. Together, they embodied the entire cycle of existence, life and death, light and shadow. To use them was to participate in maintaining the balance of the universe, to literally perfume the pathway between the human and the divine. They were not merely commodities, they were the olfactory currency of faith. While the pharaohs and priests anointed themselves with precious imported resins, the vast majority of ancient Egyptians were engaged in a far more practical relationship with scented oils. For the farmer in the field, the artisan in the workshop, or the housewife managing a home, these substances were less about divine connection and more about daily survival under the relentless Egyptian sun. The focus here shifts from the ceremonial to the functional, from the sacred to the essential. Recreating these common, everyday oils offers a remarkably intimate glimpse into the lives of ordinary people, revealing a sophisticated understanding of practical botany and self-care that was accessible to nearly everyone. Their olfactory landscape was not just one of temple incense and royal unguents, it was also the familiar, humble scent of the plants that grew along the Nile, pressed into service for health and comfort. The foundation of this daily routine was a small group of readily available base oils. Chief among them was castor oil, extracted from the seeds of the prolific castor plant, which grew abundantly throughout Egypt. This thick, viscous oil had a distinct, somewhat heavy and earthy aroma that was likely familiar to virtually every Egyptian. While not as fragrant as more expensive alternatives, its value was in its emollient properties. It served as a fundamental moisturizer, protecting the skin from the drying effects of the sun and wind. We can imagine workers rubbing it into their hands and arms before a long day of labor, creating a protective barrier against the elements. Similarly, the oil from the balanite's tree, often referred to as Balanos oil, was another staple. While prized enough to be used in higher-end preparations, it was also widely available. Its unique, sharp, and peppery character would have been a common note in the daily life of many, used as a base for infusing other herbs or applied on its own for its perceived medicinal benefits. The true artistry of these everyday preparations, however, lay in the infusion of locally sourced herbs and plants. Commoners may not have had access to frankincense, but they had a veritable pharmacy growing in the marshes and gardens around them. Mint, with its refreshing, cooling sensation, was a popular choice. Infusing balanos or castor oil with crushed mint leaves would create a simple salve that could soothe irritated skin and provide a feeling of cool relief from the heat. Fenugreek, a plant with a warm, maple-like aroma, was another household staple. It was believed to have healing properties, and an oil infused with its seeds might be used to treat everything from skin inflammations to muscle aches. Other local herbs like thyme, with its antiseptic qualities, or coriander, valued for its fresh, citrusy scent, were also steeped into these base oils. The process was simple yet effective. Herbs were crushed to release their essential oils, then left to macerate in a jar of base oil for several weeks, often placed in the sun to gently warm and accelerate the infusion. This created a versatile, multi-purpose product for the entire family. Attempting to recreate these everyday scents presents a different kind of challenge for historians. While we have elaborate recipes for kai-fi inscribed on temple walls, the formulas for a commoner's skin oil were never written down. They were part of an oral tradition passed from mother to daughter through generations. Our evidence comes from more indirect sources. Analysis of residue in simple, undecorated pottery jars found in workers' villages at sites like Deir el-Medina often reveals the chemical signatures of these common oils and herbs. The presence of fatty acids consistent with castor oil, combined with traces of compounds like menthol from mint, provides tangible proof of these daily practices. These finds tell us that access to scented preparations was not the exclusive domain of the elite. Even a modest household had the knowledge and means to create their own basic aromatic remedies. Smelling a modern recreation of one of these simple infused oils is a surprisingly powerful experience. It lacks the overwhelming complexity of kai-fi or the regal power of a royal scent. Instead, it feels practical, honest, and deeply human. The dominant note might be the earthy, slightly nutty scent of castor oil, followed by the clear, sharp brightness of crushed mint. It's not a perfume designed to impress others, but a functional aroma meant to care for the body. This scent evokes the image of a woman applying the oil to her children's skin before they go out to play, or a laborer using it to soothe his son's scorched shoulders at the end of a long day. It is the smell of resilience, of using the resources at hand to make life more comfortable and sustainable. By recreating these common oils, we complete our sensory picture of ancient Egypt. It was a civilization where everyone, from the god-king to the humblest farmer, lived in a world perfumed by necessity and ingenuity, a world where scent was woven into the very fabric of daily existence. Stepping into an ancient Egyptian perfumer's workshop would have been an assault on the senses in the best way possible. Forget sterile, modern laboratories. This was a space where raw nature met meticulous craftsmanship. The air would have been thick with the dusty, spicy scent of dried resins waiting to be ground, the sweet, heady aroma of flowers steeping in oil, and the clean, woody smell of freshly carved alabaster jars. In a corner, a fire would have smoldered under a large pot, gently warming a precious mixture. The perfumer, likely a priest with specialized knowledge, would have moved between workstations with the practiced ease of a master chemist, surrounded by an array of tools that were simple in design but brilliant in their application. To truly understand their art, we can't just read about it, we must attempt to recreate their workspace and their methods, using the very tools they left behind as our guide. The most fundamental tools in this ancient workshop were the mortars and pestles, known collectively as mortaria, but these were not the small ceramic bowls we might use today. Egyptian mortars were often made from heavy, durable basalt or granite, stones chosen for their rough texture and ability to withstand the immense pressure needed to crush hardened resins like frankincense and myrrh. Recreating the use of these tools reveals the first layer of their skill. Grinding frankincense is not a simple task. The resin is brittle at first, but can quickly gum up and stick to the stone if done incorrectly. The perfumer would have learned through experience to apply a steady, grinding motion rather than a pounding one. perhaps adding a handful of dry salt or sand to act as an abrasive and keep the resin from clumping. The sound in the workshop would have been a rhythmic, gritty crunch, the first step in transforming rough, tear-shaped droplets of resin into a fine, aromatic powder ready to release its full scent. This powder was the foundation for incenses like kai-fi and could be more easily infused into oils. Once the resins and botanicals were ground, the next step was often filtration. Temple carvings show the use of sieves, likely made from stretched linen or papyrus fibers over a wooden frame. After steeping a mixture of crushed flowers and oil for weeks, the perfumer would pour it through this cloth to separate the clear, fragrant oil from the spent plant matter. This was a test of patience and precision. Rushing the process could tear the cloth or leave sediment behind, clouding the final product. The goal was a perfectly clear unguent, a sign of purity and high-quality workmanship. But perhaps the most technologically intriguing tool we are attempting to recreate is the so-called Egyptian still. For a long time, historians believed the Egyptians only used infusion and maceration. However, archaeological finds and interpretations of certain artifacts suggest they may have developed a primitive form of distillation far earlier than previously thought. The theory revolves around a simple but effective setup. Imagine a large ceramic pot filled with a mixture of water and aromatic materials like lily petals or cedar chips. This pot is sealed with a lid, but instead of being flat, the lid has a raised, rounded dome. A second, smaller collection vessel is placed nearby. The key is what happens next. The large pot is heated gently, not boiled. The steam rising from the warm water would carry the volatile aromatic molecules from the plants upwards, where they would condense on the cool inner surface of the domed lid. Because the lid was curved, the condensed vapor would trickle down its sides and could be channeled via a small groove or a spout to drip directly into the separate collection vessel. What would be collected isn't a pure essential oil as we know it today, but rather a hydrosol, a fragrant water infused with the plant's essence, like rosewater or orange blossom water. This possibility fundamentally challenges our view of ancient technology. If the Egyptians were indeed using this method, it means they had a practical understanding of condensation and the separation of compounds through heat well over 2,000 years before these processes were perfected in the Middle Ages. Creating a working replica of this proposed still today is a fascinating experiment. Using historically accurate materials like fired clay, the process is slow and delicate. Too much heat boils the mixture too violently, creating steam that doesn't condense properly. Too little heat yields no result at all, but when balanced perfectly, the reward is seeing those first precious drops of fragrant liquid collect in the waiting jar. It's a moment that connects us directly to the ingenuity of these ancient chemists. They may not have understood the complex physics behind vaporization and condensation, but through observation and experimentation, they harnessed these principles to capture the soul of a flower in a way that simple infusion could not match. This wasn't just perfumery, it was the dawn of chemical engineering. This incredible detective work, reconstructing ancient tools and techniques, brings us face to face with one of the most significant obstacles in our quest, the raw materials themselves. Even with a perfect recipe and a replicated workshop, the entire endeavor hinges on a deceptively simple question: where do we find the ingredients? This is not a matter of a quick online order. Sourcing authentic components for these ancient scents is a complex puzzle of ethics, ecology, and modern regulations that the original perfumers never had to consider. The most poignant example of this challenge is the iconic blue lotus. In ancient times, it flourished along the banks of the Nile, a common sight in the marshes. Today, the situation is dramatically different. The blue lotus is now considered endangered or vulnerable in its native habitat due to water pollution habitat loss, and overharvesting. Furthermore, because of its mild psychoactive properties, its sale and transport are controlled or restricted in many countries. Attempting to source large quantities of wild blue lotus for a recreation project is not only ecologically irresponsible, but could also be legally problematic. This creates a fundamental tension for the modern researcher. The drive for absolute historical accuracy clashes directly with the imperative for environmental and ethical responsibility. This forces us into the nuanced world of substitution. The goal shifts from finding the exact, historically correct plant to identifying a modern equivalent that captures the spirit and scent of the original as closely as possible. This requires a deep collaboration with botanists and horticulturalists. For the blue lotus, one common substitute is the white lotus, or Nymphaea lotus, a close relative that shares a similar, though often milder, sweet and floral aroma. Another option, used more for its visual and symbolic similarity, is the sacred lotus, or Nelumbo nucifera, which has a different, more rosy and spicy scent profile. The choice isn't arbitrary, it's a careful balancing act. Perfumers will test these substitutes, comparing their essential oils or absolutes to the scant chemical data we have from ancient residues, asking, does this alternative provide a sensory experience that an ancient Egyptian would find recognizable? Sometimes the answer leads to more creative solutions, like blending a small amount of ethically sourced blue lotus absolute with a larger proportion of a white lotus extract to create a fragrance that is both impactful and conscientious. The challenge extends far beyond the lotus. Many of the resins and woods so crucial to Egyptian perfumery are also subject to modern pressures. Frankincense and myrrh trees, for instance, are facing their own sustainability crises. Overtapping to meet global demand can weaken and kill the trees, threatening the long-term survival of these species and the communities that depend on them. This reality has fundamentally changed how serious recreation projects approach sourcing. There is a growing emphasis on partnering directly with sustainable farms and cooperatives, particularly in Oman and Somalia, for frankincense. These suppliers practice responsible harvesting, making precise, shallow cuts in the bark and allowing the trees ample recovery time between harvests. They can often provide transparency about the specific species and the region the resin comes from, which is invaluable for historical accuracy. Sourcing from these ethical suppliers often means paying a premium, but it is a necessary cost. It ensures that the pursuit of ancient knowledge does not come at the expense of the very resources that made that knowledge possible, allowing us to recreate these scents in a way that honors both the past and the future. This mindful approach even influences how we handle more common ingredients. While mint or fenugreek are widely available today, the cultivated varieties we find in supermarkets may be quite different from the wild or heirloom strains that grew along the Nile thousands of years ago. Some projects now seek out seed banks or specialized growers who cultivate ancient or landrace varieties of these plants, hoping to capture a more authentic aromatic profile. This level of detail highlights the profound respect driving these modern recreations. It's no longer just about the final scent in a bottle, it's about the entire chain of custody, from the soil the plant grows in to the hands that harvest it. By confronting these sourcing challenges head-on, we are forced to become more thoughtful custodians of the natural world. We learn that the true revival of an ancient art isn't just about mimicking the past, but about understanding our place in a continuous ecological story, ensuring that the fragrant treasures of the ancient world remain available for generations of explorers to come. All this remarkable detective work inevitably leads us to a profound and humbling question: can we, with all our advanced technology and scholarly research, ever truly smell the past? Or is the scent we recreate merely an echo, a sophisticated ghost of the original? This isn't just a technical challenge, it's a deep philosophical puzzle that lies at the heart of our entire endeavor. The first and most formidable barrier is the relentless passage of time itself and its effect on the very molecules we seek to recover. When we analyze a residue from an alabaster jar in Tutankhamun's tomb, we are not analyzing the original, complete fragrance. We are examining its chemical skeleton, the stable, non-volatile compounds that were robust enough to survive 3,000 years, the most delicate and defining top notes of a fragrance, the bright, citrusy burst that hits you first, the ethereal floral whispers, are composed of highly volatile molecules. These are the first to evaporate and degrade, vanishing completely over the centuries. What remains in the jar are the heavier base notes, the woody resins, the fixatives, the waxy components. So, while gas chromatography can confidently tell us that a jar contained frankincense, it cannot tell us what that specific frankincense smelled like in its vibrant, living entirety. We are, in a sense, trying to reconstruct a symphony when we only have the notes for the cellos and the double basses. The violins and flutes have been silenced forever. Then there is the question of our methods. Even if we had a perfect, complete chemical recipe, the way we extract those scents today is vastly different from the gentle, solar-powered alchemy of the ancient Egyptians. Our modern steam distillation and solvent extraction are processes of force and precision, using high heat and powerful chemicals to wrest every last aromatic molecule from a plant with incredible efficiency. The result is an essential oil or absolute of immense purity and potency, but contrast this with the ancient technique of infusion, patiently steeping lotus petals in a jar of Balanos oil, leaving it to bake for weeks under the Egyptian sun. This was a slow, gentle interaction between the plant and the oil, a marriage of elements that likely produced a much rounder, softer, and more integrated fragrance. The heat of the sun is not the controlled, intense heat of a modern still. It coaxes the scent out rather than forcing it. When we use a potent frankincense essential oil in a recreation, are we capturing the scent the Egyptians knew, or are we creating a hyper-concentrated, modern interpretation of it? Our technological power might actually distance us from the subtle, nuanced character of the original article. This leads to the most subjective and perhaps most insurmountable obstacle of all, the human nose itself. Smell is not an objective sense like sight or hearing. It is deeply intertwined with memory, culture, and personal experience. Our modern olfactory palate is accustomed to a world of synthetic fragrances, from the clean scent of laundry detergents to the complex perfumes on department store counters. Our brains have been trained to interpret certain smells in specific ways. Would the ancient Egyptian concept of a pleasing aroma even align with our own? For a culture that valued the smoky, medicinal, and balsamic notes of resins above all else, a recreation of kaif, I might smell astonishingly potent, even harsh, to a nose used to sweet, floral commercial perfumes. Furthermore, smell is a language. The ancient Egyptians associated the scent of the blue lotus with rebirth and divinity, the smell of cedar with eternal power. For us, these are historical facts we know intellectually, but we cannot share the cultural and emotional context that gave those smells their profound meaning. When we inhale a recreation, we are translating an ancient olfactory language without a native speaker's dictionary. We can appreciate its beauty and complexity, but can we ever truly understand its poetry? Perhaps then, the ultimate value of this project lies not in achieving a perfect, definitive replication, but in the act of the quest itself. The true fragrance we are trying to recover may be less about the specific aromatic compounds and more about the lost knowledge, the rituals, and the world view they represent. Each attempt at recreation forces us to ask new questions, to look more closely at a temple relief, to reread a line of papyrus with fresh eyes. It connects chemists with historians and botanists in a shared conversation across disciplines. The scent in the bottle becomes a focal point for a much larger exploration of human ingenuity and belief. While we may never know with absolute certainty that we have smelled exactly what Cleopatra smelled, the process brings us closer to understanding the world she inhabited, a world where scent was a vital force, a bridge between the earthly and the divine. In striving to smell the past, we are not just recovering a lost aroma, we are relearning how to listen to the whispers of history, one fragrant molecule at a time. After so much discussion of ancient texts and chemical analysis, the moment of truth arrives. What do these recreated oils actually smell like? To uncork a vial of a Chi-Fi-inspired blend is to be transported not to a perfumery, but to a sacred kitchen deep within a temple complex. The first impression is overwhelmingly warm and spicy, a dense cloud of scent that feels almost edible. There's a deep, resonant sweetness, not like sugar, but like sun-dried raisins and dark honey that has been gently warmed. This is quickly followed by the sharp, clean punch of frankincense, which brings a bright, almost lemony clarity to the richness. Then the myrrh reveals itself, adding a layer of deep, balsamic and slightly medicinal gravity that keeps the sweetness from becoming cloying. It's a fragrance that unfolds slowly in the air, changing from moment to moment. It doesn't just smell good, it smells important, complex, and ancient. It's the olfactory equivalent of hearing a chant in a language you don't understand, but whose power you can feel reverberating in your bones. This is not a casual scent for a day out. It is an aroma designed to fill a space with presence, to command attention, and to feel, in a very tangible way, holy. In stark contrast, a recreation of a blue lotus oil offers a completely different, yet equally profound, experience. Where Chi-Fi is warm and dense, lotus is fresh and expansive. The initial scent is a delicate, sweet floralcy, but it is not like a modern rose or jasmine. It is softer, greener, with a subtle aquatic quality that truly does call to mind the lush marshes of the Nile. There's a hint of peppery spice in the background, a green stemminess that keeps the fragrance from being overly pretty and gives it a fascinating, almost mystical depth. Smelling it, you understand why the Egyptians associated it with the sunrise and rebirth. It has a cool, serene quality, like the first light touching the water. It is serene, elegant, and deeply calming. While Chi-Fi feels like a public ritual, the scent of lotus feels like a private meditation, a personal anointing meant to connect the wearer to a sense of peace and natural cycles. It's easy to imagine it being worn at an evening banquet, its gentle aroma cutting through the heavy air, offering a moment of cool refreshment. Then there are the regal scents, the blends we imagine might have been created for a pharaoh. These are often built on a foundation of cedarwood and myrrh, and the effect is immediately authoritative. The cedar provides a dry, robust, pencil-shaving woodiness that is both clean and incredibly tenacious. This is not a shy fragrance, it announces itself and intends to stay. The myrrh adds its characteristic solemn, resinous depth, creating a scent that feels grounded, powerful, and eternal. Some modern interpretations introduce notes like labdanum, a resin with a leathery, animalic quality that evokes the well-worn leather of chariot reins and the musky scent of a palace throne room. This is a fragrance of statecraft, of power wielded with absolute certainty. It has very little sweetness, it is serious, commanding, and designed to inspire respect and a touch of awe. To smell it is to understand how a pharaoh used scent as a non-verbal tool of authority, an invisible crown that permeated the air around them. Perhaps the most grounding and human of all the recreations are the simple, everyday infused oils. A blend based on balanos or castor oil infused with local mint and fenugreek tells a different story altogether. The base oil has a distinct, earthy, and slightly nutty aroma that is humble and practical. The mint doesn't smell like the sharp, candy-like peppermint we know today, but more like crushed wild mint, leaves, green, herbal, and offering a genuine sensation of coolness. The fenugreek adds a warm, maple-like, slightly savory note that makes the whole composition feel more like a simple remedy than a perfume. There is no pretense here. This scent evokes the hardworking hands of a farmer rubbing the oil into his sun-weathered skin, or a mother using it to soothe a child's minor scrape. It smells of resilience, of using what the land provides to care for the body. It completes the sensory picture, reminding us that ancient Egypt was not just a civilization of grand temples and golden treasures, but also of everyday people whose lives were intimately connected to the practical, aromatic bounty of the Nile. This journey through the chemistry and ingredients brings us face to face with the most profound question of all: what happens when we actually smell these recreations? The experience goes far beyond a simple historical curiosity. It taps into the very wiring of our brains. Science tells us that the olfactory bulb, the part of our brain that processes smell, has a direct and intimate connection to two key regions: the amygdala, which handles emotion, and the hippocampus, which is central to memory. This is why a single, unexpected aroma can instantly transport us back to a specific moment from our childhood with startling clarity. Scent is not processed through the complex filters of language or conscious thought first. It hits us on a primal, emotional level. When we smell a recreation of an ancient Egyptian oil, we are not just analyzing a historical artifact. We are engaging in a form of emotional time travel, using this unique neurological pathway to bypass centuries and feel a connection that is incredibly immediate and personal. Imagine the moment for a historian or archaeologist who has spent their entire career studying ancient texts and artifacts. They have deciphered the hieroglyphs describing the Kai-Fi ritual. They have measured the alabaster jars that held the sacred oils. They have traced the trade routes for myrrh on maps. Their understanding is deep, but it is intellectual, built from facts and theories. Then, they are presented with a small vial containing a carefully researched recreation. As they uncork it and inhale, the experience is transformative. The dry, academic descriptions on papyrus suddenly bloom into a full sensory reality. The complex, spicy, sweet aroma of Kai-Fi is no longer just a list of ingredients. It becomes a presence. One can almost hear the chanting of priests in a smoky chamber, feel the cool stone of the temple walls, and sense the weight of ritual significance in the air. For that individual, ancient Egypt ceases to be a civilization confined to books and museums and becomes something tangible, something that can be breathed in and felt. It transforms their intellectual knowledge into an empathetic understanding, bridging the gap between studying a culture and, for a fleeting moment, feeling a whisper of its essence. This emotional impact extends to our understanding of Egyptian spirituality. We can read about the belief that pleasing scents were the sweat of the gods, but to smell a fragrance created specifically for that purpose changes the concept from an abstract idea into a visceral reality. The overwhelming power of a scent like Kai-Fi, with its dense layers of frankincense, myrrh, and wine-soaked raisins, feels inherently ceremonial. It's not a light, casual perfume. It's an aroma designed to fill a space and command attention. Inhaling it, one intuitively understands why the Egyptians believed such a scent could please a deity. It has a grandeur and complexity that feels worthy of a god. It makes the ritual of the awakening of the god suddenly make sense on a human level. Of course, you would anoint a divine statue with this, because anything less would feel insulting. The scent becomes evidence of a deeply felt relationship between humanity and the divine, a relationship built not just on fear or duty, but on a genuine desire to offer beauty and pleasure to the gods. On the other end of the spectrum, smelling a recreation of a commoner's oil, perhaps based on castor oil and infused with simple mint, offers a different but equally powerful connection to daily life. This humble, earthy, and slightly medicinal aroma doesn't speak of temples and pharaohs, but of sun-scorched skin, hard work, and practical care. It evokes the image of a family sharing a simple remedy, of the resilience required to live in a demanding environment. This scent connects us not to the elite, but to the millions of anonymous individuals who built the civilization. It's a smell of necessity and ingenuity, and it grounds the entire ancient world, reminding us that it was populated by real people with real concerns about their health and comfort. Where the sacred oils inspire awe, these everyday scents foster a profound sense of shared humanity across the millennia. Ultimately, the power of these olfactory recreations lies in their ability to make history a multi-sensory experience. We can see the artifacts, we can read the translations, but smell adds a dimension of emotional truth that is difficult to achieve any other way. It collapses time, creating an intimate, immediate bridge between our world and theirs. Each carefully recreated scent is more than a scientific achievement. It is an invitation to feel history, not just to know it. It allows us to understand that the ancient Egyptians were not so different from us. They sought comfort, they aspired to connect with the divine, and they found joy and meaning in the beautiful aromas that filled their world. In breathing in these lost fragrances, we are not merely observing the past, we are, for a moment, sharing a fundamental human experience with those who walked the banks of the Nile thousands of years ago. Yet we must remember that for the ancient Egyptians, there was no clear line separating the pharmacy from the temple. A recipe for a headache was as much a spiritual prescription as a physical one. Many ailments were believed to be caused by external forces or imbalances in the body's channels. The Ebers papyrus might instruct a physician to create a scented oil with juniper berries and coriander to treat a painful condition, but the application would likely be accompanied by a spell or an invocation to a deity like Sekhmet, the goddess of healing and plagues. The oil itself was the vehicle for both the botanical medicine and the divine intervention. The act of anointing the patient's forehead with the fragrant blend was a holistic therapy, addressing the discomfort through the calming power of scent, the potential anti-inflammatory properties of the plants, and the profound psychological comfort of ritual. This integrated approach reflects a world view where well-being was a balance of physical and spiritual harmony, and scented oils were the essential tool for restoring it. Modern science now offers us a fascinating lens through which to re-examine these ancient remedies, and in many cases, it provides a surprising validation of their intuitive wisdom. Take myrrh, for example, a cornerstone of both sacred ritual and medicinal recipes. The Ebers papyrus recommends myrrh for treating wounds and skin infections. When contemporary researchers analyze myrrh resin, they find it contains potent compounds like terpenoids and sesquiterpenes, which have demonstrated significant antiseptic, anti-inflammatory, and analgesic properties. This provides a scientific basis for its ancient use as a topical treatment. Similarly, frankincense, another staple, is now the subject of extensive research for its potential to modulate the immune system and reduce inflammation, particularly in conditions like arthritis. The calming chamomile like mayweed the Egyptians used for skin irritation is known to contain azulene, a compound with proven soothing and anti-inflammatory effects. Even the simple practice of inhaling certain fragrances for comfort aligns with our understanding of aromatherapy, where scent molecules can directly influence the limbic system, the brain's emotional center. This doesn't mean every ancient cure was effective, but it reveals a remarkable depth of observational knowledge. Through centuries of trial and error, the Egyptians identified plants whose chemical profiles genuinely offered therapeutic benefits, even if they explained those benefits through a framework of divine magic and channel blockages rather than biochemistry. The challenge in recreating these medicinal oils today lies not just in identifying the ingredients, but in understanding their preparation and application as a complete system. A modern researcher looking at a recipe for a digestive aid might see instructions to mix dates, honey, and a specific scented oil into a paste. Our first instinct might be to focus on the potential anti-spasmodic properties of the oil's botanicals. But we must also consider the role of the other ingredients. Was the honey primarily a sweetener, or did its natural antibacterial properties play a part? Was the date paste simply a base, or did its high fiber content contribute to the remedy's effectiveness? Recreating these recipes forces us to see them as the Egyptians did, as complex formulas where each component had a role. The process of gently heating the oil to infuse it with herbs, as depicted in temple carvings, wasn't just about extraction. It may have been crucial for activating certain compounds or creating a more palatable mixture. By attempting to follow these recipes to the letter, using historically accurate techniques, we gain a deeper appreciation for the Egyptian physician's craft. It was a sophisticated art that blended a keen observation of nature's pharmacy with a holistic vision of human health, where a pleasing aroma was considered an essential part of the healing process itself. But to fill those alabaster jars required more than just local ingenuity. It demanded a mastery of geography and commerce on an imperial scale. The desire for these precious aromatics quite literally redrew the map of the ancient world, transforming Egypt from a river-bound kingdom into the central node of a vast, intercontinental trade network. The most legendary of these ventures were the expeditions to the fabled land of Punt, a place shrouded in such mystery that its precise location is still debated, though it is widely believed to be in the region of modern-day Somalia and Eritrea. The famous reliefs at the mortuary temple of Queen Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahri provide us with a breathtaking visual record of one such voyage. They depict the Egyptian ships setting sail down the Red Sea, a perilous journey into the unknown, and returning triumphantly laden with treasures. But the most precious cargo wasn't gold or ivory. It was living, breathing frankincense and myrrh trees, their roots carefully balled in baskets for the journey north. This was more than a trading mission. It was an act of botanical espionage and economic strategy, an attempt to transplant the very source of divine fragrance directly into Egyptian soil and bring its production under pharaonic control. The routes for these coveted goods formed an ancient superhighway of scent. From the arid coasts of Punt and southern Arabia, caravans laden with frankincense and myrrh would begin their long trek northward. They navigated the inhospitable deserts of the Arabian Peninsula, following paths known only to seasoned guides to reach the trading hubs of the Levant. It was here that these southern aromatics met other crucial materials coming from different directions, from the cedar forests of Lebanon, a commodity almost as vital as the resins themselves arrived, magnificent logs of cedar wood. This timber was essential for building the ships that powered Egyptian trade and the funerary barges that carried pharaohs to their tombs, but its wood was also chipped and steamed to produce a prized essential oil, valued for its dry, tenacious fragrance and preserving qualities. Further west, across the Mediterranean, another thread of the network reached into the Aegean world. From there, Egypt imported saffron, the vivid crimson stigmas of the crocus flower, which offered a uniquely spicy, honey-like aroma and a brilliant yellow dye for the linens of the elite. Controlling these arteries of commerce was a primary function of pharaonic power. A successful pharaoh was one who could secure the borders, pacify nomadic tribes along the trade routes, and maintain diplomatic relations with the kingdoms that controlled key ports and passes. The wealth generated was astronomical. A single successful expedition to Punt could finance years of monumental building projects or military campaigns. These aromatics became a de facto currency used to pay the skilled artisans who decorated the tombs in the Valley of the Kings and to reward loyal officials. They were also the ultimate diplomatic tool, gifted to foreign dignitaries to impress them with Egypt's reach and sophistication. When a pharaoh presented a visiting ambassador with a vial of the finest myrrh, he wasn't just giving a pleasant perfume, he was displaying his control over a supply chain that stretched to the very edges of the known world. This relentless pursuit of fragrance made ancient Egypt one of the world's first truly globalized societies. An elite Egyptian's daily life was surrounded by products that spoke of distant lands. The oil they anointed themselves with might contain frankincense from a tree that grew 1,000 miles to the south, dissolved in a base oil pressed from nuts grown along the Nile, and stored in an alabaster jar quarried from the eastern desert. Their home might be furnished with cedar from Lebanon, and their food seasoned with saffron from the Aegean. Scents were the most immediate, tangible proof of this interconnectedness. In an age before satellite maps or instant communication, the aroma of a foreign resin burning in a temple was a direct, smellable connection to a distant, almost mythical landscape. It was a constant aromatic reminder that the power of Egypt did not stop at its borders, but extended its influence across deserts and seas, pulling the treasures of the world toward the Nile. The empire was not just built on stone and soldiers, but on the very air itself, perfumed with the breath of its vast economic and diplomatic reach. Perhaps no single story better encapsulates the obsessive value ancient Egyptians placed on sacred aromatics than the legendary expedition commissioned by Queen Hatshepsut to the land of Punt. This was not a simple trading mission. It was a state-sponsored enterprise of exploration and acquisition, an endeavor so significant that she had it immortalized in breathtaking detail on the walls of her magnificent mortuary temple at Deir el-Bahri. The reliefs there are not just art, they are a proud declaration of a logistical triumph, a documentary in stone that shows us the breathtaking lengths to which a ruler would go to secure the very source of divine fragrance. The journey itself was a monumental feat. We see the great Egyptian ships, their sails billowing, setting sail down the Red Sea, a body of water fraught with unknown perils. The artists took care to depict the foreign landscape. The sailors encountered dome-shaped huts built on stilts above the water, a strange and exotic terrain that must have seemed like another world to the Egyptian envoys. The leader of the Puntites and his distinctly portrayed wife are shown, emphasizing the diplomatic nature of the contact. This was a voyage into the mythical, a daring reach beyond the known borders of Egypt to connect with the origin of the most precious substances on Earth. The primary objective and the most stunning achievement is gloriously depicted in the returning cargo. The reliefs show the ships being loaded not just with sacks of raw resin, but with something far more valuable, living, breathing myrrh trees. You can see them, their root balls carefully wrapped and secured in baskets for the long sea voyage, a testament to an incredible feat of botanical engineering. This was the ultimate act of economic and religious strategy. By bringing 31 living myrrh trees back to Egypt, Hatshepsut was not merely acquiring a finished product, she was attempting to transplant the very source of the sacred resin directly into Egyptian soil. The plan was to plant these trees in the gardens of her temple, bringing the production of this divine substance under her direct control. It was an attempt to domesticate the scent of the gods themselves, to make Egypt self-sufficient in the most crucial element of its spiritual life. The inscription accompanying the scene declares the result. the myrrh of Punt has been brought to you. The best myrrh is upon all your limbs, the odor of the god's land is upon you." But the aromatic treasure did not stop there. The ships returned laden with a king's ransom in other goods that speak volumes about the broader economy of scent. Alongside the trees were heaps of raw myrrh resin, alongside the bright, lemony tears of frankincense and fragrant woods like ebony. There were bags of fragrant gum resins, elephant tusks, and exotic animal skins like leopard pelts, which may have been used in priestly vestments. Even gold is listed among the treasures, yet it is telling that the living trees are given such prominent visual focus. This hierarchy of value in the artwork sends a clear message. While gold was wealth, the ability to generate sacred fragrance was power of a higher order. The success of this expedition was a cornerstone of Hatshepsut's reign, a powerful piece of propaganda that demonstrated her divine favor, her command over nature, and her ability to provide for Egypt's eternal spiritual needs in a way no pharaoh had before. This incredible undertaking forces us to consider the scent that Hatshepsut herself might have commissioned from this unparalleled haul. With such direct access to the finest myrrh trees, freshly transplanted, it is highly plausible that she ordered the creation of a signature fragrance, a scent unique to her reign. Imagine a complex unguent based on the prized myrrh from her own puntite trees, perhaps blended with the frankincense from the same voyage, and smoothed with the luxurious ebony wood oil. This would not have been a simple perfume, it would have been an olfactory monument, a wearable testament to her greatest achievement. Every time she moved through her court, the distinctive, solemn, and sacred aroma that surrounded her would have been a constant, silent reminder of her successful voyage to the ends of the earth. In a political climate where she, a female king, had to constantly reinforce her legitimacy, this personal scent became a tool of statecraft. It was the smell of divine right, of global reach, and of a power so absolute it could command the very trees of a distant land to grow on Egyptian soil. The expedition to Punt was the ultimate expression of a truth that permeated every level of Egyptian society. The pursuit of sacred scent was a pursuit worthy of a kingdom's greatest resources. The legacy of these ancient Egyptian scents did not vanish with the last pharaoh. Instead, it has seeped into the very foundations of modern perfumery, where a growing movement of artists is looking back to the Nile for inspiration. Today's niche perfumers are the new high priests of fragrance, and they are not merely copying ancient recipes, but interpreting the entire Egyptian olfactory worldview for a contemporary nose. They are drawn to the raw materials, the sun-baked papyrus, the serene lotus, the sacred incense, but also to the profound concepts behind them, the connection between scent and spirituality, the idea of fragrance as a protective talisman, and the use of aroma to tell a story of power and eternity. This isn't about historical reenactment, it's about capturing a feeling, a timeless essence that resonates just as powerfully now as it did 3,000 years ago. Consider the note of papyrus. In ancient Egypt, this was the medium of knowledge, the literal scroll on which history, magic, and medicine were recorded. Modern perfumers are fascinated by its scent profile, which is not obviously floral or sweet. It is dry, earthy, slightly woody, and has a subtle green, aquatic quality, like the banks of the Nile after the floodwaters recede. A fragrance built around papyrus doesn't just smell interesting, it evokes the idea of ancient wisdom, of secrets waiting to be unfurled. It provides a minimalist, almost architectural backbone to a composition, creating a scent that feels intellectual and calm. Similarly, the lotus continues to be a muse. While the ancient blue lotus is rare, perfumers use its symbolic weight and the general accord of aquatic florals to create scents that speak of purity, rebirth, and tranquil beauty. These modern lotus notes are often blended with watery or green elements to amplify that sense of serenity, offering a fragrant escape from the chaos of modern life. The most dominant Egyptian influence, however, remains the sacred trinity of resins: frankincense, myrrh, and labdanum. These form the heart of the entire incense category in modern perfumery. Niche houses create fragrances that are often called cathedral scents or desiccant chants, which aim to capture the feeling of stillness and awe one might experience in a vast, ancient space. But the modern interpretation is nuanced. A perfumer might pair the bright, citrusy smoke of frankincense with unexpected notes like clean musk or dark chocolate, highlighting its complexity. Myrrh might be used not for its funerary associations, but for its deep, balsamic, and almost sweetly medicinal warmth, creating a scent that is both comforting and intriguing. Labdanum, a resin that shares a leathery, animalic quality with ambergris, is used to give a fragrance a sun-warmed, skin-like quality, adding a human sensuality to the celestial incense. This creative revival demonstrates a beautiful cycle. The very scientific techniques we use to analyze ancient residues, like gas chromatography, have given perfumers an unprecedented understanding of the chemical constituents of these ancient materials. This knowledge doesn't bind them to the past, it liberates them. They can now isolate a single molecule from frankincense that provides a specific effect, a burst of clarity or a whisper of smoke, and build an entirely new fragrance around it. They are, in a way, having a conversation with the ancient Egyptian priests, using a shared vocabulary of molecules, but composing a completely new sentence. The goal is not to replicate the smell of a tomb, but to capture the spirit of a civilization that believed a scent could be a bridge to the divine. When you wear one of these modern interpretations, you are participating in a tradition that stretches back millennia, anointing yourself with a fragrance that carries the echo of temple rituals and the enduring human desire to touch something greater than ourselves through the power of smell. Walking through the bustling streets of Thebes at the height of its power would have been an experience that engaged every sense, with smell acting as a constant, unspoken narrative of life along the Nile. Let's attempt to piece together this lost olfactory world, moving from the grand temples down to the crowded alleyways, blending the sacred oils we've explored with the everyday aromas that defined existence. The air would not have carried a single scent, but a complex, layered tapestry that changed with each step you took. Imagine starting your day near the great temple of Karnak. Even from a distance, the first sign of the city would likely be the smoke, a thick, fragrant plume carrying the unmistakable scent of Kai-Fi incense, a sweet and spicy blend of frankincense, myrrh, and wine-soaked raisins that let everyone know the morning rituals for the god Ammon were underway. This sacred smoke would have mingled with the sharper, cleaner aroma of burning animal fat from sacrifices, a greasy, pungent note that spoke of appeasing the deities with the finest offerings. Approaching the temple walls, you'd be met by the smell of cool, wet stone from the libations poured by priests, and the faint, floral scent of lotus blossoms wilting in offering bowls under the already climbing sun. Leaving the sacred precincts for the main thoroughfares, the character of the air would shift dramatically. The dominant smell would become the earthy, almost sweet scent of sun-baked mud brick, the primary building material for every home and wall. This humble, dusty aroma would be the foundational note of the entire city, warmed by the morning heat. Intertwined with it would be the life-giving, yet sometimes challenging, smell of the Nile itself. Close to the riverbanks, you'd detect a freshness, a moist, green scent of papyrus reeds and wet clay, but in the inner city, this could easily mix with the less pleasant odors of open drainage canals and the general humidity of a dense population living near water. Cutting through this background would be the irresistible, comforting smell of baking bread emanating from countless homes and communal bakeries, The air would be filled with the warm, yeasty fragrance of emmer wheat and barley being baked into the staple loaf, a simple, wholesome aroma that promised sustenance. The marketplace would be a sensory explosion. Here, the sharp, peppery scent of Bolano's oil from a merchant stall would compete with the aromatic piles of spices, cumin with its warm, earthy punch, coriander offering a citrusy note, and the intense fragrance of garlic and onions. You might catch the smell of fresh fish just pulled from the river, or the musky scent of leather being worked by a sandal maker. For the wealthy elite passing by on litters, their personal fragrance would create a moving bubble of luxury, a rich blend of cedarwood and myrrh that announced their status long before they arrived, a stark contrast to the simpler smell of castor oil and sweat on the laborer carrying a heavy load. This was the true scent of daily life, a vibrant, sometimes overwhelming mixture of the practical, the commercial, and the human. As evening fell, the olfactory landscape would transform once more. The heat of the day would begin to release the scents it had absorbed. The mud brick walls would exhale a warm, mineral-rich fragrance. In the homes of the wealthy, the air might be sweetened by the light burning of a precious cone of fat infused with lily oil, perched on a wig, its floral scent melting slowly into the room. From the public baths and homes, the scent of simple soap made from ash and animal fat would mix with the more refined aroma of someone anointing themselves with a lotus-infused oil after their wash, a moment of personal care and refreshment. And always as a final, gentle blanket over the city, the smoke from countless small household altars and evening temple ceremonies would rise, carrying prayers and the familiar, comforting smell of frankincense up into the starry sky. This reconstructed portrait is more than a list of smells. It is an understanding that for the ancient Egyptian, every aroma, from the most sacred to the most mundane, was a thread in the fabric of a world where the divine and the daily were seamlessly interwoven. Yet for all the scientific precision and historical detective work, the pursuit of recreating these ancient scents is far from a unified field. It is a landscape marked by spirited, and sometimes heated, debates that strike at the very heart of what it means to accurately recapture the past. One of the most fundamental battlegrounds lies in the interpretation of the ancient texts themselves. The hieroglyphic terms for plants and resins are not always clear-cut. A single word might be used to describe what we now understand are several different botanical species. Take the term often translated as lily. Was this the iconic blue lotus, the white lotus, or another fragrant flower entirely? Scholars can spend entire careers debating the subtle clues in determinatives, the silent glyphs that categorize a word, and comparing descriptions across different papyri. A recipe might call for an ingredient known as anti, a substance frequently mentioned in temple inventories. Some experts argue it refers to a type of myrrh, while others, pointing to its described use in eye paint and its texture, propose it could be a lead-based mineral or even a now extinct plant. When modern perfumers rely on these translations to source their ingredients, they are building on a foundation of academic interpretation that is constantly shifting. A recreation based on one scholar's reading could be fundamentally different from another's, leading to fragrances that are equally plausible yet entirely distinct. This linguistic fog means that every attempt at revival is, in part, an act of choosing which expert's voice to follow into the aromatic unknown. Beyond the academic disagreements over words, there exists a deeper, more philosophical controversy surrounding the ethics of the entire endeavor. Should we even attempt to recreate formulas that were considered sacred, whose precise knowledge was restricted to an initiated priesthood? For some historians and cultural observers, this work borders on the sacrilegious. They argue that these scents were not mere commodities, but were integral to rituals believed to sustain the cosmos. To replicate them outside of their sacred context, for the purpose of a scientific experiment, or worse, for commercial sale, strips them of their spiritual meaning and reduces a profound religious practice to a consumer product. It's akin to attempting to mass-produce communion wine without the faith. The substance may be similar, but the essence is lost. This perspective urges a position of reverence and restraint, suggesting that some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries. The very act of dissection, of reducing a prayer in oil to its chemical components, could be seen as a violation of the ancient Egyptian worldview, which saw no separation between the material and the divine. On the other side of this ethical divide are those who see recreation as the ultimate form of respect, a way to honor the ancient Egyptians by engaging with their world on the most intimate sensory level possible. This viewpoint holds that by using our modern tools to understand their ancient craft, we are affirming the sophistication and enduring relevance of their culture. It is an act of empathetic archaeology, striving not to steal secrets but to listen more carefully to what the past is telling us. Proponents argue that experiencing a scent, even an approximation, can generate a deeper, more visceral understanding of Egyptian religion and daily life than any textbook ever could. It bridges an emotional gap, fostering a connection that transcends time. The debate often centers on intention. Is the project conducted with scholarly integrity and cultural sensitivity, or is it a gimmick? Most serious researchers in the field walk this tightrope carefully, presenting their work not as a definitive replica, but as an informed interpretation, an invitation to wonder rather than a claim to have solved an ancient mystery. This leads directly to the most practical challenge faced by every historical perfumer, the modern nose. Even if we could achieve a perfect, one-to-one chemical match with an ancient oil, there is no guarantee that a 21st century audience would find it pleasant. Our olfactory preferences are shaped by our time and culture. The ancient Egyptian palate revered smoky, balsamic, and animalic notes, the scent of sacred resins, funerary unguents, and the musky undertones of ingredients like labdanum. To a modern sensibility, accustomed to clean, sweet, and fresh fragrances, a historically accurate kaif I might initially register as heavy, medicinal, or even funereal. This creates an inevitable tension between historical purity and audience appeal. Should a recreator compromise slightly, perhaps by brightening the top notes with a citrus accent or softening the base with a familiar vanilla to make the experience more accessible? Or does any adjustment betray the historical truth? This is not a new problem for those working in historical revival, from chefs recreating Roman feasts to musicians performing on reconstructed instruments. The goal is always a balance, to create something that is true enough to the source to be educational and evocative, yet engaging enough to resonate with a contemporary audience. It forces the recreator to make a choice. Are they an archaeologist or an artist? The most successful projects manage to be a little of both, offering a window into the past that is both authentic and astonishingly alive. Now that we've explored the incredible science and history behind these ancient fragrances, you might be wondering what it would be like to connect with this lost world through your own senses. While we can't all commission an expedition to Punt, we can engage in a small, personal act of olfactory archaeology right in our own kitchens. Let's try a hands-on project to create a simplified version of an ancient Egyptian infused oil. This won't be a perfect historical replica, but it will follow the same fundamental principles of patience and gentle infusion that an Egyptian perfumer would have understood. You'll need just a few items: a small, clean glass jar with a tight sealing lid, a half cup of a good quality base oil like olive or almond oil, a tablespoon of frankincense tears, which you can find online or in some specialty wellness stores, and one broken cinnamon stick. The process is beautifully straightforward and requires no special equipment. First, gently warm your base oil in a small saucepan over very low heat. You don't want it to simmer or smoke. The goal is just to make it warm to the touch, which helps it absorb the aromatic compounds more effectively. While the oil is warming, place the frankincense tears and the pieces of cinnamon stick into your clean glass jar. Once the oil is warm, carefully pour it over the resins and spices in the jar. You should hear a soft crackle as the warm oil hits the frankincense, beginning to release its resinous scent immediately. Seal the jar tightly and give it a gentle swirl to combine everything. Now comes the hardest part, patience. Place the jar in a cool, dark cupboard and let it sit for at least 2 weeks, though a full month will yield a much richer fragrance. This waiting period is essential. It mimics, in a small way, the slow solar infusion the Egyptians would have used, allowing time for the oil to slowly pull the essence from the solid ingredients. Every few days, you can take the jar out and give it another gentle swirl, observing how the color of the oil may deepen to a warm golden hue. After the infusion period, the final step is filtration. Set a small fine mesh sieve over a bowl and line it with a coffee filter or a piece of clean, undyed cotton muslin. Slowly pour the oil through the filter, catching the spent frankincense and cinnamon. What remains in the bowl is your very own ancient-inspired scented oil. When you dab a little on your wrist, take a moment to breathe it in. The first thing you'll likely notice is the warm, familiar sweetness of the cinnamon, but then the frankincense will come through, that clean, bright, slightly lemony and pine-like aroma that was so precious to the Egyptians. It's a simple blend, but it carries a remarkable complexity and a tangible link to the past. This personal act of creation, of waiting and transforming simple ingredients, connects you directly to the ancient art of perfumery. It's a humble reminder that the desire to surround ourselves with beautiful, meaningful scent is a deeply human impulse, one that has bridged the centuries to bring us closer to those who walked the banks of the Nile. The quest to recover these lost fragrances is far from over. In fact, we are standing on the threshold of what may be its most exciting chapter. Emerging technologies are poised to revolutionize our understanding, allowing us to analyze ancient residues with a sensitivity that would have seemed like pure magic just a generation ago. The next frontier lies in pushing gas chromatography, mass spectrometry to its absolute limits. Imagine instruments so precise they can detect not just the primary components of an oil, but the faintest trace molecules that have clung to the walls of a jar for millennia. These minor compounds are like the unique accents in a spoken language. They can tell us not just that an oil contained frankincense, but potentially which specific valley in Oman the resin was harvested from, or whether it was collected during the tree's first or third tapping of the season. This level of detail would transform our recreations from broad interpretations into hyper-accurate regional portraits, allowing us to distinguish between the frankincense used in a Theban temple and the supply reserved for the royal court at Memphis. An even more revolutionary possibility lies in the analysis of ancient DNA. While the idea of extracting genetic material from a 3,000-year-old oil stain sounds like science fiction, advances in paleogenetics are making it increasingly feasible. The challenge is immense, as DNA degrades over time, and the harsh chemical environment of resins and oils accelerates that breakdown. But if successful, this technique could definitively solve some of our most persistent botanical mysteries. When we encounter an ingredient listed in a papyrus under an obscure name, or see a plant depicted in a relief that we can't confidently identify, ancient DNA could provide the answer. A tiny, degraded fragment of plant DNA preserved within a residue could be sequenced and compared to a global genetic database, allowing us to pinpoint the exact species of lily or the specific subspecies of mint that the Egyptians prized. This would move us beyond educated guesses and into the realm of genetic certainty, finally putting a scientific name to the plants that have been known to us only by their ancient epithets. The most tantalizing prospect, however, is the discovery of a perfectly sealed vessel from an untouched tomb. Throughout the history of Egyptology, most tombs were found already plundered in antiquity, their contents exposed to the air and contaminants for centuries. But the potential remains for another discovery on the scale of Tutankhamun's tomb, a royal burial left completely intact, with its store of sacred oils still sealed and protected from the elements. Within such a vessel, the organic residues would be in a state of pristine preservation. The volatile aromatic compounds that normally evaporate within years might still be trapped, having had no escape route. Analyzing the headspace, the air trapped inside the sealed jar could provide a snapshot of the oil's complete aromatic profile at the moment it was sealed. It would be the closest we could ever come to smelling the original substance, offering an unparalleled benchmark against which to measure all our future recreations. Every new archaeological season in Egypt carries the hope of such a find, a sealed time capsule waiting to offer up its fragrant secrets. These technological leaps are not happening in isolation, they are part of a broader shift towards open collaboration across disciplines. The future of this field depends on Egyptologists, chemists, geneticists, and perfumers working together from the very start of an excavation. Imagine a future dig where a mass spectrometer is part of the standard field kit, allowing for on-site analysis of residues before they are exposed to modern contaminants. Data from these analyses could be instantly shared with botanists and perfumers around the world, creating a global conversation in real time. This collaborative model turns every new discovery into a collective problem-solving exercise, accelerating our progress exponentially. The goal is no longer just to recreate a scent, but to build a comprehensive digital library of ancient Egyptian aromatics, a database linking chemical signatures, genetic information, and historical context. This resource would become an invaluable tool for understanding not just perfumery, but trade, medicine, and daily life, allowing us to trace the aromatic footprint of an entire civilization with unprecedented clarity. The future of ancient scents is bright, illuminated by the powerful beams of modern science, and guided by a shared desire to recover one of the most intimate and evocative threads connecting us to the past. And so we arrive at the end of our aromatic expedition, holding in our hands not just a bottle of fragrant oil, but a key to a door we thought was locked forever. This journey began with questions carved in stone and faded ink on papyrus, with the faint chemical whispers left in empty alabaster jars. We followed the clues left by priestly chemists and royal perfumers, deciphering their recipes and learning their craft. We ventured with them to distant lands like Punt, braved the deserts with their caravans, and stood beside them in their sun-drenched workshops. And through the remarkable marriage of historical scholarship and cutting-edge science, we have achieved something extraordinary. We have reached across a chasm of 3,000 years and, in a very real sense, shaken hands with the past. The scent in that bottle is more than a mixture of resins and flowers. It is a triumph of curiosity, a testament to our enduring desire to understand those who came before us. What makes this connection through scent so uniquely powerful is its immediacy and intimacy. We can read about the reign of Hatshepsut, we can marvel at the gold of Tutankhamun, but these experiences, while awe-inspiring, maintain a certain distance. They are observations. Smell, however, bypasses the intellect and speaks directly to our emotions and memories. Inhaling the complex aroma of a recreated kaif is not like reading a description of a temple ritual. It is like standing at the threshold of that temple, catching the sacred smoke on the air. Wearing a scent inspired by the blue lotus is not just learning about its symbolism, it is briefly sharing in the serene, spiritual headspace of an ancient Egyptian at a banquet or in prayer. This is a connection that transcends the glass of a museum case. It is visceral and personal. It allows us to understand, on a gut level, that these were not mythical figures but people who, like us, found comfort, meaning, and identity in the beautiful aromas that filled their world. They feared the same sun, sought the same relief, and aspired to the same divine connection, and we can now perceive a trace of that shared experience. This leads us to a final, profound realization about the timeless power of scent itself. Long after monuments have crumbled and languages have been forgotten, aroma remains a universal language. It is the most potent trigger of memory we possess, capable of instantly conjuring a person, a place, or a feeling with breathtaking clarity. For the ancient Egyptians, this power was consciously harnessed. They used scent to encode their deepest beliefs about life, death, and the divine into the very air they breathed. The smell of frankincense was a prayer, the aroma of lotus was a promise of rebirth, and the sacred oils were a passport to eternity. They understood that to create a memory was to build a bridge to the future, and they used fragrance as the cornerstone. In reviving their scents, we are not merely smelling the past, we are participating in this ancient, human tradition of using aroma to tell the story of who we are and what we value. So, as the last notes of this ancient fragrance fade from the air, I invite you to consider the scents that define your own life. What are the aromas that, when you encounter them, immediately transport you to your childhood home, a cherished holiday, or a beloved person? Is it the smell of rain on hot pavement, a particular spice from your grandmother's kitchen, or the crisp scent of a winter morning? These personal olfactory landmarks are your own version of the sacred oils of ancient Egypt. They are the invisible threads that weave the story of your existence, connecting you to your past and shaping your identity. The ancient Egyptians left us a powerful lesson that our lives are not just recorded in words and images, but are also preserved in the subtle, often unnoticed library of smells that surround us. By paying attention to these scents, we honor that legacy, recognizing that the most enduring connections to our history, our culture, and to each other are often those we can breathe in.